Welcome back to the Real with Joseph Labin. I am Joseph Labin. If you're new here, please subscribe, hit the like button on the way in, especially if you can support this channel. Thank you for tuning in today. My man Mike Antonace. Mike, how we doing on this Thursday afternoon?
I am doing fantastic. Cavs are starting 9-0, even though the sun is no longer out in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. The sun has gone away for the season. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Molly is obviously doing pretty good
Doing
too.
pretty
Say hi,
good.
Molly.
Well, I'm sure
Um,
Molly's excited about the Cavs too. I mean, like you
oh,
said,
always.
obviously daylight savings is upon us now, but the Cavs have been a ray of sunshine this season. 9-0,
Very
big win last night at New Orleans. Um, Obviously a big one tomorrow night against probably the best team they played so far this year in the Warriors. I think tomorrow night Warriors are 7-1 in the season, so that's
Oh,
be a
that'll be a
really
great
good
game.
test. Kenny Atkinson's former team. Kenny Atkinson though is I think now broke the record. He did break the record last night for the most wins in a row, the best start to a season for a first time head coach on a new team. 9-0.
It's
I was
also the best
prepared.
start the Cavs have ever had.
Yeah, yeah, best start they've had. I guess we'll touch on it real quick, Mike, just for like a couple minutes before we get to the Browns, because we want to talk some positivity. I think we didn't even put this in the notes, but I think we probably should give you guys some positivity, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Your take on the Cavs so far, real quick, Mike?
Um, I love this. I love this team. It's just lot of hard work that's paid off from the front office and the new coaching staff. Getting Mobley way more involved in the offense, pushing the pace a lot more fast break. We're not one of the slowest teams, and shooting a lot more threes, and which is good because turns out everybody's a really good shooter on our team.
Yeah,
Um, so I think it's so much fun, and we were already a good defensive team, and you know, we were talking on the phone earlier, and you were saying how they're getting hands in the passing lanes, more violent hands, and I agreed with your point wholeheartedly. It's just a really fun team, and if we keep it up, I don't see why we can't be competing for the NBA championship this year.
yeah, I agree. I think when I see this team, number one, Evan Mobley's evolved. I think because he's in the right spots now offensively, he's being utilized more, getting the ball more in the high post, and just letting them use his skills. I mean, he had that play the other night too, where he blocked the ball and then he brought it up the court, crossed the guy up, and slammed it with his left hand. You see plays like that, you're like, geez, for a 7 footer. I think you're seeing Evan Mobley be more of a ball handler and just let him dictate. He's always been an underrated passer, in my opinion, for a big man. You're seeing more of his introverted pick and rolls where the guards will come up and set the screens and he'll come off as the ball handler. And that's hard to guard. Like Kenny Atkinson said, he's even adjusting to it as a coach when teams do it to them. Um, but I think just the spacing's better. Like you said, the pace, which is, creates more threes with the spacing and pace. And Jared Allen is having a monster season right now. He will be an all-star. A great rim protector, one of the best rim protectors in the game right now, and has some monster blocks, some violent blocks too. I mean, it's fun to watch him. But Darius Garland as well, big game the other night. I just think what I love about this team, Mike, is the core four. All of them look like all-stars so far this season,
Oh, I know.
and the rest of the team is feeding off that. Even guys like George Niang, who last year a lot of people were not as high on after the season, has found a role again. I think within the offense, it's gritty toughness off the bench. I like this team a lot, and I think I'm curious to see what they do moving forward. And up until the trade deadline, maybe they go out and get another wing, maybe, or
Yeah.
maybe if they feel it's necessary, just obviously to compete with Boston and maybe win the NBA championship this year. Who knows? But good thing we have a positive team in Cleveland. We have some positivity going because not a whole lot of positivity so far from the Cleveland Browns this year, Mike. I know we've talked about it at length on the show and our Sunday lives, and you are writing your articles on Roundtable. And Andrew Berry yesterday spoke at the bye week presser and had some interesting things he said. A lot of them, and we'll start with this. And one thing that stood out to me, Mike, and I'll throw it to you. Obviously, you watched the press conference, and I watched recaps again before we came on here. The first thing that stood out to me was the beginning of the press conference was he said their goal for the rest of the season, Mike, is doing the things that they are in control of to play good football. And I feel like when I watched and listened to to Andrew Berry yesterday, excuse me, was I felt a lot of the emphasis was just on what we can do as a unit and collectively as an organization, this regime, him and Andrew Berry, or excuse me, him and Kevin Stefanski, and trying to he said their goal is still to win. Primary focus is still to win the rest of the season. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, part of that's GM speak, and part of it, I mean, every team, even like, I mean, no team, especially, how do I want to word this? So, no team, especially a team that has so many veterans like ours, wants to like be like, oh no, we want to try and tank for the highest draft pick possible. We're not gonna say all that. I mean, I think they're gonna try their utmost to go out there and win, and um, you know, um, see what they have in a lot of young players. That's I think the big thing is trying to win in that situation. And there are a lot of really good young players on the Browns team. I mean, Mike Hull has looked great since he came back from suspension. Isaiah McGuire has one of the highest pass rush win rates in the NFL, and he's actually a top 3 rated um, defender of the run as an edge whenever he's been out there. So he already is really good as an edge defender, and if he's just got to learn to get home a little bit quicker on sacks. But Isaiah McGuire seems to be like a player that could take another step here soon, which is great because he was a 4th round pick. That 2024 draft is starting to look a little bit better. Obviously Cedric Tillman's had a couple of big games the past 3 weeks. So, I my take is, obviously I think they want to win, but it's almost GM speak for like, we're going to see what the young kid, the young guys have, what we
Mhm.
need to like do moving forward.
Yeah, I guess when I listened to it, the emphasis I saw was just more of, like I said, this season and focusing on the season.
Mm,
And I kind of get a sense too that him and Kevin Stefanski as a collective, I think they are as a collective together. They're this is the regime we've had since 2020 as GM and head coach. I think there is more of an emphasis on trying to be as successful as possible the rest of the season because the future may not be promised for them, whether people agree with that or not. But I think that's the feeling I get, especially when you read Zach Jackson's article yesterday, the Athletic great article, and you kind of read that, you kind of just there's a sense and a feeling that there's a lot of uncertainties with a lot of people in the future. Obviously, not just Deshaun Watson with his future organization. I think we all agree is probably there is no future with him in the Cleveland Browns probably going forward. Now, obviously, there's a lot of you know complications with that with the salary cap hit and everything with his contract. But I do get a sense and a feel though that that might be what their goal really is because all that's promised to them is right now. And it's interesting. What do you see the rest of this season primarily if that is their focus? I mean, do you go with Jameis Winston if you feel like he's your best chance to win? If you're Kevin Stefanski, if you feel like maybe your job's on the line, or you get, or possibly, we don't know. Or when do you go out with DTR at any point? I mean, what do you think of that?
That's a good question. I think they will roll with Jameis Winston just because you want to see like offensively what some of those younger receivers have said can keep taking steps and become your true number one receiver. And like you see enough out of him and you're like, okay, yeah, we got him. Cause I don't like DTR has some fun aspects about him, especially like in the RPO game.
Mm,
But, you know, they see him in practice more, as on top of um, seeing him in game. Like part of me as a fan would like to see DTR with a full week of preparation and see what he could do. But I think they roll with Jameis. I think also because like yeah, you're going to be focused on winning and seeing what you could do, but also I think it gives like the younger guys on the offense more of an opportunity to actually succeed.
mm.
No hate to DTR at all. I think he's a good athlete and has got some talent about him, but I just think overall
Yeah,
the
I don't think he's
Jameis.
an NFL. I don't think he's an
Yeah,
NFL
I think
quarterback.
Jameis at least will give you a semblance of an NFL offense.
Yeah, and I think based on if that's their primary goal is still to win the rest of the season, especially for these guys, I think you have to probably roll with Jameis. He's your best option right now. Like I said, every time DTR, he's had some injuries already in his career. Unfortunately for him, no one's seen anybody get hurt, but durability is an issue. And the times when he's out there, you question is this guy really an NFL quarterback? But I think Jameis, he shows flashes throughout his career where, against the Ravens game, he looks great. And then the next week comes out 3 interceptions, and it's kind of been the story of his career. It's just very up and down, and very consistent. Um, but one thing I want to hit on, Mike, before we move on to more future things, which is one thing I want to see with this offense the rest of the season is their running game with the O line and the running backs. I know it's been a big topic this week. I know there's people have different opinions on that. Maybe what the problem is. I think we're all trying to figure out. It's just outsiders. None of us claim to be experts or anything. But one of the biggest problems I see though, Mike, and I'll go and I'll hand it off to you, is with the O line and stuff. Is just I think when you watch the Ravens game, especially the all 22, and you keep track of what the types of plays when they're under center, when the formations are running.
Mm-hmm.
When they commit more to being under center and running the ball more downhill, I think that's when the O-line really starts to impose their will, because obviously passing game, you're moving backwards, you're protection mode, and you look at the game last week and a lot of games early in the season that when they're constantly in the gun and in pass protection, I think that's where our O-line struggles. And it's how our running backs struggle too, because when your running backs are constantly in the gun, especially a guy like Nick Chubb who's coming off an injury like that and trying to get his confidence back, trying to get a rhythm back, and just get back to his normal self. And I think it takes time off an injury. I think any athlete off of that would tell you that,
Yeah.
it's a mental thing really more than anything. But I think it's, I thought they did a better job in the Ravens game of putting him more under center, Jameis Winston, and running plays out of under center and pulling the guards more. We saw more wham blocks in that game. Kind of more of the old school running scheme we used to have with Bill Callahan back in 2020, that first year with Kareem Hunt and AVP when they were here. And your running back's able to get when your running back's behind center, he's able to get a more downhill running attack. He's able to
Mm-hmm.
get his momentum moving downhill. I think when I watched last week, Mike, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me was when your O-line's constantly in 2-point stances and pass protection, and you're trying to run out of the gun a lot, and just a basic man running scheme. I just don't see how you can expect to create a whole lot, especially against a good front like against the LA Chargers like that.
Right.
That's what I see schematically and just with the play calling. It's just been a lot of inconsistencies at times with the Browns offense. They don't seem to have an identity, and I think that's why the running game's just been so inconsistent too. I'm curious your thoughts on the running game.
I mean, I agree with a good amount of that. I think also, at least from my personal viewpoint, I think our players are getting a little bit old.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, I mean, outside of Jack Conklin, who's looked good, Wyatt Teller, in my opinion, has regressed the past 3 years. Even when Callahan was here, like from 2020 on, he's only gotten steadily worse, not better. And that started when even Callahan was here. Center, maybe I think Ethan Posich was absolutely a Callahan merchant, because he wasn't really anything in Seattle. He comes here under Callahan, all of a sudden he's a top 3 center. And now he's kind of gone back to what he was in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joel, I mean, we all love Joel. He is up there in age though. And, eventually, like, you are no lineman, like eventually your body just can't keep up with it anymore.
Well, luckily for me, I got to play until I was young, and I had the medical.
Yeah,
but a lot of people though,
you're not 37 out there.
I can't imagine being 37 though and still doing that.
Trying to stand up a 22-year-old 3 tech.
Yeah, and it's hard too. And a guy like Joel, not to cut you off, hand it back off to you, but a guy like Joel too, just to hit on that, it's probably hard too. And your team's 2-7, and
I mean,
getting cold out. He's been through a lot of losing seasons, unfortunately, and I think that's kind of the morale too.
Yeah, and also I think last year was the first year he was actually out a couple weeks with an injury. Joel had always been an Iron Man, but he had that back injury, which for a guard I imagine is a nightmare.
Oh yeah, and whenever we saw him at left tackle that one game too, and he did okay, but there were some plays where the young man speed,
Yeah, you could tell. And he used to be able to hold up there pretty well.
Yeah.
But he's just getting older. And DeJuan Jones has looked serviceable at left tackle. I wouldn't say he's looked great, but he hasn't looked bad either. If he keeps developing there, I mean, that's one thing you and I should definitely get either excited or interested about, because if he can become a decent enough left tackle and especially get better in run blocking, which he wasn't even really good at that in Ohio State, that would be huge help. I think it's a mixture of things. I think our running scheme, pulling blockers more was a lot better under the just
Mhm.
normal Stefanski offense. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Um, I think it's just kind of a mixture of things, putting it into a cauldron and it not not good. And Nick Chubb's still coming back off of an injury. I think it'll take time for him to look like himself again. Not
Yeah.
to be the devil's advocate, if he can look like his old self again, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think it's a mixture. The scheme isn't as good as far as running scheme. Players are regressing or getting older, just too young. It's a mixture of those things. Like you have
Yeah.
players that just aren't developed yet, and then you have players that are just getting older. And also, Nick Chubb still coming back from it. And hell, even now, Jerome Ford didn't look good, but he was coming off of what was he at 2 weeks with an
Yeah,
ankle
they were
injury.
definitely
So,
yeah, and then you had Deontay Foreman in there, and now he's not. You know,
and
I
Foreman's just one of those, like, you need 2 yards, give to Foreman, but he's never
I
going to
like
do
the
it.
combination when I think they'd be best suited to use all 3 backs, really, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. I think they should use all 3 down the stretch here. I think just use them different formations in
yeah,
certain parts of the game. I think you
I get
should.
that.
I think they looked healthier in that Ravens game when they were using both. Chubb and Foreman are more of hammers. They like the physicality, go up the middle. I think Jerome Forex get a little more outside, get more in space. So I think they should utilize all 3. And I think, like you said, Dewan Jones, he's looked better at left tackle than right. I think Dewan's technique looks a little better to me. You remember I put that picture up here when he was at right. It seems like his pre-snap alignment too was just off. His shoulders weren't square, and
Yeah,
they do seem to be a little more comfortable. And the more they play under center too, they just look more comfortable.
right.
Uh,
And to your point that you made in a previous video, not to cut you off, I'm
no, you're
sorry.
good.
But you had made a point in a previous video that you were vindicated on is it sounds like from multiple reports that he was in camp and at the beginning of the season, I think well overweight.
Yeah.
And apparently now over the course of the season, he's lost like 35 pounds.
Yeah,
Um,
he didn't look. I think a lot of his problems were just didn't he just wasn't in shape. Getting
yeah.
blown by and the six even in a six technique,
Oh yeah. And you saw him like getting gassed real quick. Like you could
yeah,
see,
even they were in wide 9 a
you
lot of
know,
times, and they just because they knew they just line up the speed and just blow right by him, and yeah, I just think I know he had the injury in the offseason, I believe. Is that correct? Or
yeah,
he had
yeah, he did.
but
He
it
was,
sounds like
he had surgery.
yeah, it sounds like he wasn't really able to get in shape in the
Mhm.
offseason. I think that's a lot of if you're not in shape, no matter how skilled you are at all. Here
Yeah, you're
remember,
not
like, when the great Michael Jordan came back, from 2 years late or 18 months layoff in basketball, he still wasn't he was great, but he still wasn't the full Mike at 45, number 45 because he still wasn't he was in baseball shape. He came back that next offseason and got back in MJ shape, and you saw what happened the next year, 72 and 10, and,
yeah,
but any athlete, even the greatest one ever, in my opinion, Jordan, and they got it. You have to be in shape. You get in shape to
yeah,
play the game, and he's kind of playing himself in shape throughout the season. Like you said, and maybe that couple weeks off when he was out, I think maybe helped him get in shape. Yeah, I don't maybe behind the scenes he was
yeah,
doing more cardio, more just or whatever he had to do. I don't know, maybe more tape as well, and just get more comfortable. But one thing we'll move on though to more of the future topics now, kind of the future of the franchise, long term approach. They asked Andrew Berry yesterday, Mike, about more of the long term, and he wouldn't get into a whole lot of it. One thing they did ask him though about the offense in particular with the coaching changes is they made in the offseason. And I've talked about that a lot in the show. That I don't personally believe Kevin Stefanski wanted to fire Alex Van Pelt. I think it was more of a decision from upstairs, which
mhm.
Albert Breer and
And I think
Jonathan
that's some
Jones.
fair speculation.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports, Albert Breer, 2 national guys, and then some of the local guys as well. Even kind of people have hinted at that. That it was more of they weren't thrilled with Deshaun's progress. They wanted more of the air raid attack offense, like I've showed on the show. And um, I, so they asked him about that, and he said, it's more of a Kevin question, and that but at the end of the day, it is we all do collab on decisions and stuff. And so I'm
Decisions.
curious your thoughts on that because when they asked Kevin Stefanski about it, it was more of and about any decision, whether it's changing quarterbacks or anything. Kevin
Oh,
always
he
says
says it's my decision.
he
That's
says
what.
it's his decision, but he also collaborates with Andrew
Yeah,
and others and ownership as well. So I'm
Yeah.
curious your thoughts on all this, looking back on it now.
I mean, that's not super unusual for a coach to have to collaborate with the GM when it comes to any sort of coaching change or at least benching like a quarterback under contract.
Mhm.
Like if if like Jameis Winston isn't playing well the next 3 weeks and we go 0-3 and Stefanski's like, we'll give the kid, a chance and see what he looks like. Like he's not gonna need to collaborate on that. Like benching Jameis Winston isn't the same as like, hey, we're moving off of Deshaun Watson, right?
Mhm.
Um so I I think while I do agree that I think ownership or even GM can ask the coaches to make changes, and that's why I think I'm not sure if ownership forced him to fire Alex Van Pelt. I know there's articles out there. I know that you speculate that, and which like I just said, I believe is completely fair speculation. I wouldn't put it past them, but I
Mhm.
also, in the same token, hindsight's 2020. But Watson, I'll eat you. Um, have to threaten my dogs. I won't eat them, kind of listeners. That's a joke. He's an 8-year-old boy. Haven't cooked him once. Um, but
Back to the Browns, but
yeah, back to the Browns. But yeah, I mean, in the off season, I don't, I wouldn't have put it past Kevin to fire Axel Impel either. I can't. I kind of agree with you, but I also can see the thought process of Kevin deciding to do that because him and Alex both kind of have a very similar offensive mindset when it comes to that West Coast style, heavy play action, heavy under center, you know, um, offense. And, Kevin unfamiliar with the spread. And if Deshaun was more comfortable with that, maybe he felt like it was something to do. But I
yeah,
mean,
I think the biggest thing I see and why I wanted to hit on that with the offensive coaching
yeah.
staff stuff because I don't,
But then
that
again, I
he was
completely
asked
see your
about it.
point. And I
Yeah, because
don't,
because they asked Andrew Berry about it. Do you look back at it as was it a bad decision? I think that's been more talked about this week, and I've been talking about on the show that
yeah.
Albert Beer clip. He said all the way back in I think January at 98.5 in
I
Boston
mean,
about.
we can both agree it's a bad decision now,
Yeah,
right?
I think Alex Van Pelt was highly undervalued. He was the glue of that staff from a lot of people. What Albert said, and I agree with that. Because Kevin's a great guy, and but he's not as outgoing, which you could tell by his personality. Where AVP was a more outgoing, a little more of like the funny guy, but he was involved with the quarterbacks. I just think you look back at it now, you don't see that identity this year. Where last year, even with Joe Flacco and the other plethora of quarterbacks they had back there last year, they made it work with each one because they had more of an identity, and there
Yeah,
was more collaboration with Kevin. I think with AVP, I think Kevin and AVP were really comfortable with each other,
yeah,
and they were aligned. I just don't see that this year. I think
right.
you
And it's easier to create new creative plays when you and your offensive coordinator both understand the offense you're running.
exactly, and
It's
you
easy
have
to add
collaboration.
spice to it, if you will.
Yeah, it's collaborative, and yeah, I just don't think, in my opinion, I understand. I don't think Kevin wanted to, and I think that's why we've seen the
Yeah.
just dysfunction this year on offense. And it's going to be a great question after the season because we're talking about more of the future stuff now and what
Yep.
decisions can be made down the road. I mean, if the front office or the ownership really did do that to Kevin Stefanski, that's really bad. I mean, I don't, and I don't know if Kevin should be the first one to be fired if they do blow this up because that could be where it's heading because obviously ownership can't fire itself. So I think Kevin Stefanski got screwed in a lot of ways, and I thought that response was interesting from Andrew Berry because 1 minute Andrew Berry was talking more about how him and Kevin are on the same page, and then when he was asked about that, it was more of kind of like, well, you should ask Kevin. He just felt I just didn't when I listened to him, I just feel like he was kind of the man in the middle. Like he's just
Mhm.
kind of like he knows probably more obviously than what he's saying, which I understand and respect that, which is kind of what he's always been in his press conferences. He even said that yesterday. I'm not gonna talk about certain things, in this setting, which I respect. Um, but he was asked about the Deshaun Watson trade as well, Mike,
Yeah.
and about was that more of you guys? Was it more of ownership? And I think it was a fair question to be asked because it is very important to know. Because it's at this point right now, that trade seems like one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL. It has not panned out at all, obviously due to injury and just Deshaun's when he's out on the field you and I both said does not look confident, does not look like the same guy he was in the past. It just didn't look like it fit at all.
Yeah,
I think
athletically
whoever
wasn't
I
there.
think they overcalculated the fit before they made the trade in terms of what they were before prior to bringing him in. I think when you watch his style even back when Houston, I think it probably didn't mesh well anyways with what they were good at already, you know what I mean? So, but he did say, quote, "All of us were on board with that decision." And
Yeah,
so if that is the case, Mike, I mean, it's really hard to just brush that trade off and act like, that was their biggest move of this
yeah,
tenure. And they've really put themselves in a jam because of it financially, and just they've
yeah,
wasted 2 seasons. And um, I go back to it seems like Kevin Stefanski and Ange Barry could be the fall guys. Um, I'm just curious your thoughts on all this because it's going to be something that's obviously going to be talked about
yeah.
throughout the season because it's going to be a big issue in January.
Yeah, and people who watch us know I'm a fan of Stefanski and Barry, and I think overall they've done a pretty good job in their tenure. Now, they absolutely deserve criticism for the Deshaun Watson trade. You can't. It's a big, like you said, big trade, hasn't panned out. Contract was controversial when it was signed. Um,
Gave up 3 first. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And now granted, on the other side of the coin, I think Andrew has drafted relatively well, considering that we haven't had a first in 3 years. Finding players like Martin Emerson, Dewan Jones, Cedric Tillman looks to be like paying off at this point, and even some players in the undrafted that we signed. But they absolutely deserve criticism. And I wouldn't be surprised if their seat is hot. I don't know if they're going to clean house or not. And I've even said I'm a huge Kevin Stefanski fan. I think he would easily find another job elsewhere if fired. But like, if Kevin has lost the locker room, you have to get rid of him. That's just the way it is. I don't know the temperature in there. I haven't seen too many articles about that. But even if like as good of a coach as I think Kevin is, if he lost the locker room, he's got to go. Or if you don't feel like Andrew can pick the right quarterback, he's got to go. I think there's fair criticism to be had. Personally, where I stand with it is
mhm.
I'd like to see what they could do with a young QB, but we'll see if they get that opportunity or not. It's up in the air right now, and
Yeah.
all things are on the table. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's unfair speculation. I don't think that's too far fetched, and I don't even necessarily think that it's completely undeserved for everything to be on the table.
Do you think the lack of moves at the deadline to maybe try to acquire more assets for the future, could that be a signal that maybe ownership, um, obviously Za'Darius wasn't obvious because he was a veteran, he was in need, a team
Yeah,
wanted him. Do you think maybe them trying not to, there was Njoku rumors, Elijah Moore rumors, there's a lot of guys that possibly could have been on the market Tuesday and could have been dealt, possibly Greg Newsome, another one who's I thought that day could have been gone to one of the NFC North contenders. But do you think their lack of moves at the deadline could signal that either these guys maybe don't have the guarantee going forward, that ownership kind of wanted to stand pat and just kind of maybe if their goal is to get somebody else in there to run the show, that they want them to make all decisions? I mean, what do you think of that?
could be. You could look at it both ways. It certainly could be something akin to that, but also the way you could look at it is they're more optimistic about the situation as well, because you could look at it both ways. It could be that
Right.
what you said, or they could be optimistic about the situation being like, oh, we still have a really good young core, some really good veterans that we think can be good for the future. And like they very well could be looking at, like you said, what they did last year with Flacco, Walker, DTR, and the other one always escaped. Well, Watson, obviously, but seeing what they did last year with Flacco mainly and being like, look,
PJ
all we
Walker.
really, and PJ Walker,
Yeah.
yeah, and saying, hey, all we really need is the right QB. Like, so it could be very much that. Like, I fully expected them to move. I thought they were going to move more veterans, more like aging veterans whose contract is up. Specifically, Za'Darius obviously did happen, but I thought Elijah Moore was for sure gone.
Mhm.
Um, but it could be both things. It could be like a mixture of, it could be an optimistic or it could be pessimistic. You just never know. Um, from my perspective, because I'm always a half glass full kind of
You're the
guy.
most optimistic Browns fan I think I probably
I
know, which is
try.
good.
I try
I
to. I
need that.
try.
When I'm feeling down, I call Mike. Mike, please tell me something good.
I try.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look at it from the optimistic point of view. I think it's, they think that they can really turn the ship around. They have, well, depending on what we finish with the record, we could have either 4 or 5 picks in the top 100, which, the 4th round pick right now is like 103. So like,
Yeah.
but anybody who charts the draft knows that picks like 90 to 125, that's pretty much all the same caliber of player that you'll get there. So, I think they can turn around with the right personnel, but that's the way I'm going to look at it is from the optimistic point of view. But you could absolutely be right as well, and they
Well,
could.
I think they're in a murky situation too because we could say is this more just a retooling, but when you
I
look at the
think so.
market, though, you look at the quarterbacks of the draft. I think outside of Shador Sanders and maybe Quinn Ewers, I don't really see a home run hitter anywhere. I don't see,
I agree
there's
with
a
that.
lot of question marks. You know what I mean? Like I know you were higher on Carson Beck at one point.
I
Now you
was
now you think he
past
might be a
tense.
fourth rounder. You know what I mean? Because
Past tense.
yeah, he is somebody that didn't really. He was supposed to be a Heisman guy at the beginning of the year, possibly a top 5 pick, and has not looked like that. Obviously, he's got a great team around him. Um, and then with Shador Sanders as well, I know there's been the Vegas rumor they can maybe force their way somewhere. Although they said they're open to going to the right situation. I mean, Deion's made that pretty clear. He wants his son to go to the
Mhm.
situation they feel comfortable with. Seeing if you have a top 3 pick, maybe you can get him. It's not a guarantee he's coming here. He may pull an Eli Manning. I don't know. They haven't ruled that out. That's by their words. That's all. I'm just going off of what they're saying. But then when you look at the quarterbacks too, Mike, and potential free agents, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett,
Joe
Tyler
Flacco.
Heineke, Marcus Mariota, Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco's probably going to stay. Jameis Winston, um, Justin Fields, it will be available. Josh Dobbs, Cooper Rush. I mean, it's not the
There's some,
greatest. And
not the
there's some
greatest, but there's some bridge names in there that I would
Russell
feel.
Wilson is on there. Tommy DeVito,
Mm.
Tommy Cutlets. I mean,
Oh, Tommy, we would love Tommy DeVito in Cleveland. Just
um,
who he is. I don't want him as a player, but like as a character, Cleveland
yeah,
would love that kid. But
and I could say we can bring in maybe Sam Darnold, because I don't know the Vikings obviously drafted JJ McCarthy. Are they going to pay Darnold when you have him on a rookie deal? And JJ looked good. Obviously, it was one game, but he's also coming off a season-ending injury as a rookie.
yeah,
That's interesting. I think the only one I see is Sam Darnold. I think Justin Fields showed he can be that guy. I think he showed enough in Pittsburgh that he can be serviceable. Um, but outside of those two names, I don't really. I mean, Flacco is probably going to stay with the Colts. They're off AR5 now, and outside of Sam Darnold, I mean, because the only situation I see, Mike, is if you draft Shador Sanders, he's probably going to play as a rookie,
yeah,
right? I think he's just too
yeah.
big
I
of a
would think
name.
he would.
He is going to play as a rookie at some point and probably for most of the season. But the rest of the guys, I think, are question marks. You may have to sit for a year and
Yeah,
have to bring in a bridge guy. And so I don't know where the retooling could really happen because even in the receiver market as well, I think receiver's a big one. Um, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, obviously, Chris Godwin, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hawk, all older guys, a lot of older guys available.
yeah.
The only
Mercy.
guy that I see maybe pops is T. Higgins, but I don't know if some people question if he's really a true number one. He's 25. The other guys are 30 some years old or more.
Yeah,
So it's not even great there. Um, I don't know if they're in the position. It's almost like if they wanted to retool, is what I'm getting at. I don't know if the market's set up for them to retool in the draft at the most important positions they need.
yeah.
Quarterback and receiver.
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic about receiver. If Cedric Tillman continues to build on this, you're really
Yeah.
only looking for a slot. Which, if you're looking for a slot, that's easier to draft
He's
in the
been a bright
second.
spot for the season. I think one of
Yeah.
the
So
few bright spots.
if Cedric Tillman continues to build on what he's been doing, and he can be your true number one, you already see Judy has made some plays. He can still be your two. you're really only looking for a slot guy. So, but what you said about quarterback is 110% true. There's a lot of question marks about a lot of guys, and I hope that as we get closer to the Senior Bowl specifically and the combine, that we start to see some more growth and get really sink our teeth into this draft class, because there are some guys that might surprise you. You really like Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Jackson Dart has potential. He has talent,
yeah,
but he's been a little inconsistent. But he has one week he looks like a first round pick, the next week he looks doesn't. You
yeah,
know, but
and
I think,
then
but he's a guy. I think there's a lot of guys, most guys in general coming out of the drafts in general. I think have to probably sit, and that's kind of I think could the Browns looking at their best option could be Sam Darnold. That could be
yeah,
their big acquisition going forward this
draft
offseason.
Curtis Rourke and sign Sam Darnold to a 1 year.
I mean,
Here,
yeah. I mean,
Hoosiers fans, we would have so many Hoosiers fans becoming Browns fans.
I think they got to get their guy in the first round if that's the goal, if that's the route they take. And yeah, like I said, I think we're probably looking at maybe Sam Darnold could be the guy we're hoping for because that's the only fix I see at quarterback. I mean, he was asked about Deshaun and the future. I don't think
He was
Deshaun will play
very aloof,
very aloof,
which is saying
and we
no
have not
without
heard from the
saying.
Watson camp yet either since that day.
I don't
So,
think we
and
will
that might be
either.
by design. So,
I don't think we'll
um,
hear from him.
yeah, I think that's been by design. So I think that's pretty much over. Now the money part of it, that could be a whole thing. The Browns may have to just eat it. I don't know how that'll happen, but
Might do the baseball thing.
maybe I but my whole before we even we could talk about personnel and stuff and all that, but
Yeah,
to me it's gonna come down to who's making the decisions.
yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, going back to it, we'll wrap up with this, when they asked about who made the Watson trade, I think that's gonna be the big for a lot of fans. That and the comments I'm getting is we need to fire whoever made those decisions. According to Andrew Berry, all of us were on board. And so you look at the full Browns brass, right? You got the Haslam's at the top. Obviously, they're the owners. They're not firing themselves. So you look below him. I think it goes Paul DiBodesto. I don't know if they're renewing his contract. I know he's eligible. I wouldn't renew it personally. I think it's time to move on from that. Just my opinion. I know a lot of people wonder what he does. I've showed on the show. Go watch my San Diego Browns video. I think he is heavily involved in a lot of decisions. It's even written in articles. Um, I think that's why he's been around here for that long. I think Darrell Righto put out an excellent tweet the other day on X as well, kind of showing the since he's been here in 2016, kind of the results with him in the building. I thought Darrell did a great job doing that. I think then you go to Andrew Berry, then Kevin Stefanski. If all of them are on board, I think ownership could be in a position where they have to make a cleansing. They have to refresh this somehow. They got to rejuvenate the organization somehow. And the one thing I will say, even if ownership did make that trade, my one critique with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski is, I know you're a lot higher on the draft picks than I am probably. I have a big concern with some of the picks they make and some of the decisions with the trades. I thought some of the trades didn't pan out what they gave up, or some of them, like the Elijah Moore trade, but also the development on the field. I have not seen a lot of that, and I've been saying on the show a couple of weeks now. I don't see the development, and I think that goes to your whole coaching staff, more on particularly on the offensive side. I've seen more defensively with Jim Short since he's arrived. You remember a lot of guys we wrote off before Shorts got here, and then he got here, and we said, oh, they're actually not bad players overall. A lot of people said JOK wasn't going to be a good player before Shorts got here. He gets here now, he looks like a franchise player again. Coaching matters in football and any sport, especially in football and development. I think when you're in a market like Cleveland, you have to really hit the draft and make smart trades. And I think both of those areas, in my opinion, have not been great in
Mhm.
4 years. That's just and when I grade it, and I don't see the development. I think they probably will have to move on. Um, I'd probably, if I had to give a percentage chance right now that we could see a whole new regime next season, I think it's probably looking like a 70% chance or more. That's where I would grade it. But you may have a different one. What's your take on all that? Where do you think Andrew Berry and this regime will be here going forward?
I think they will be. I'm probably at like a 33% chance they're not.
Okay, so you're 33%.
That they would, yeah, that they're not going to be here.
Is there anything that could happen the rest of this season that could make you go higher or lower?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know about Andrew because again, I think The major criticism with Andrew is the Deshaun Watson trade, but I think otherwise he's drafted well without having a first round pick and done well in free agency for the most part. There are some misses in free agency, but he's made some smart ones, like Dalvin Tomlinson, rebuilding the D line. Um, Juan Thornhill is a miss, but for whatever reason, free agent safeties never work out. I don't know why.
Mhm.
You know, most of the trades, like the Amari Cooper trade, did pay out. I know he's no longer here, but you got 3 really good years of production out of him. So where I would like, for me, it's like no matter what, I hope they keep Andrew. But if Stefanski keeps losing, the locker room becomes toxic, guys start fighting. Stefanski doesn't strike for all of his pros. The biggest fault is he doesn't strike me as a guy that can take the bull by the horns kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I don't
it,
know if it could be if he may have lost. I don't know if I would say Kevin's lost the locker room. I think the organization may be losing its players, and that goes to the people upstairs above him. Because I can't help to not forget last year when that team could easily quit on Kevin, and not guaranteed that was a different offensive staff too, we don't know who bladed all those guys, but it seems like to me the people upstairs forced that decision. That's just we talked about that earlier. I don't know if they quit on Kevin. I think a lot of players really like Kevin. I think a lot of it is that a lot of players don't believe in the organization going forward. I think they're not. That's why you hear guys like Miles Garrett, possibly being brought up in trade, which I don't think he'll get traded, but I think it's
no.
but I get what people are saying in terms of could he want, because
That's
there's
the
just a
only
lot of
question that Andrew Barry answered
yeah.
straight face.
No,
Was trading it
I don't
Miles
think
Garrett
I never
ever
thought he
in the
was gonna be
cards?
traded, but
No.
I understand why people are asking that
Yeah, no,
because
I know.
when you look at the Browns right now, when guys like Myles Garrett, you look at the team as could these guys they're just wasting their years in terms of trying to win. I think that's where I think a lot of players could be thinking as well. Not really with Kevin, um, but I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. Like I said, I graded off of I know somebody left the comment to me the other day talking about well we haven't had 3 first round picks. I said, "Yeah, I get that, but they also made the trade to make that to allow that to happen,
Yeah,
number 1. But also number 2, you still have to the rounds 2 through 7, just you don't just throw them in the can like they don't matter, especially when you're a market like Cleveland. I mean, you look at the Kansas City, I think one of the reasons why they're so good because you have guys like Isaiah Pacheco, who was a 7th round pick, you know what I mean? You look at the 49ers, their starting quarterback was Mr. Relevant, the
right.
last pick of the draft. I mean, again, it goes back to coaching and development, and I don't see a whole lot of that just from top to bottom. I think that's my biggest critique with them. I don't think these guys fully made the Watson trade. I think that was more of ownership forcing that ultimately in the end. Um, but again, ownership's not going to fire themselves, so I do think there will be probably some type of change at the end, some change, if not a lot of change at the end of the season. But um, other than that, though, Mike, I mean, we all agree it has been the greatest of seasons, like we want it to be, sitting there at 2-7. So before we get out of here, we wrap it up. Mike, you got anything else you want to add to this today? I think what's something you're looking forward to the rest of the season, or
I mean, I'm looking forward to watching the young guys, seeing because
yeah,
Mike Hall's looked really, really, really good. Um, Seeing how many steps he can take, watching Isaiah McGuire is going to be fun. Um, Seeing if some of these backup linebackers can step up with JOK gone, specifically Mahmoud Diabate. Um, but yeah, a lot of just watching the young guys, I'd say, is going to be exciting.
yeah.
Seeing what they got.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious to see that, and I'm curious to see what the offense looks like identity-wise with the play caller with Ken Dorsey. I want to see what it looks week to week if they could
Yeah.
finally find like a consistent identity there. But
Mhm.
well, thank you guys for tuning in today. Mike, they need to like, subscribe, and share, right?
They need to. Absolutely, or I'll find you. No, I'm
Oh,
kidding. Uh, so yeah, like, subscribe, and share. It helps us out a lot, guys. It's free to do.
it's a free tap of the button. That's it.
A little free tap, and if you're on YouTube, hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we go live or whenever we release a new video. Great show. Always have a lot of people on, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think if you're a Browns fan, or even if you're not and you're just a different fan of a different NFL team outside looking in. Give us your opinion. Because we can only speak from our perspective. So, yeah.
Yeah, go check Mike out at roundtablesports.net as well. You got an article coming out pretty soon,
I
Mike?
do. I have Fixing the New York Jets coming out. I'm going to have a couple of fixing articles centered around coaching changes, quarterback changes, and early draft stuff. Because I released my first round mock, and these are going to be deep dives into teams that desperately need it. So Jets, us, the Browns,
Yeah.
and some other teams that might be. I don't know if I'll do the Panthers just because I don't know how to fix them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Defibrillate the Panther. Clear.
But
Yeah.
all right, guys. Well, go check out Mike, roundtablesports.net. Like, subscribe, share all the good stuff, and go Cavs.
Go
Go Cavs.
Cavs.
Go Cavs. We'll see you guys next. We're out of here.
Later.